Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing one kit to make 15 cards, and you can easily make many more cards with this kit other than just the 15 I'm making. There's still a ton of supplies left once I'm done. This kit has 20 A2 cards and envelopes in it, 8mm adhesive tape, a roll of it, as well as 40 foam squares. And there's also a lot of foam outside of those squares that you can use for your cards as well. There are 18 pieces of cardstock, 40 sheet 6x6 paper pad with lots of different prints on it. There are 298 die cut ephemera pieces in one of the packages. There's a sheet of 60 gemstones, as well as 38 chipboard frames and corners. There are 2 sheets of puffy stickers as well as 2 sheets of chipboard stickers. So many different things in this kit. Now I'm going to be using this kit. There's also a couple add-on dies as well as a press plate and die set for sentiments that I'm going to be using. You can easily create these cards without those dies and without the press plate and sentiments, because there are so many different sentiments that I have left over from this kit, as well as many different shaped die cuts or pre-cut printed die cuts and chipboard stickers. And also a lot of puffy stickers left. So I'm creating 15 cards with this kit. And like I said, there is a ton of leftovers once I'm done. So you can easily create more than this. These are the printed papers in that 6x6 paper pack. I love 6x6 papers for cards because the print is scaled down and it's perfect for creating backgrounds for cards. And I'll be matting those printed papers with some of these solid cardstock sheets in this pack. So the great thing about working with a kit is everything coordinates with each other. So this paper pack here has a lot of solid cardstocks as well as 2 sheets of gold and 2 sheets of silver to coordinate with the different papers, printed papers, chipboard stickers, and whatnot in this kit. It makes creating a ton of cards really easy because you're not spending your time matching up different accessories or ephemera. This is the die set that is an add-on for this kit. This is called the Festive Floral Mix. This is the Merry Greetings die set. This is also an add-on to this kit to create some sentiments. And this is the Holiday Banner and Greetings press plate and die set. And in that one press plate and that one die set, you can create 10 sentiments all at once. So I'm going to start off by creating some sentiments using my BetterPress system. I'm actually going to create 20 sentiments total. I'm not going to use all of them because I want to have a bunch of different ones to pick and choose while I'm creating. I'm going to heat emboss my sentiments. I typically prefer to heat emboss my sentiments because I just like that extra texture that heat embossing gives. So I put a little bit of embossing powder tool on the Hammermill cardstock that I have taped to my clear plate. I use some VersaMark ink to ink up that plate, and I'm going to run it through my Platinum 6 machine to press those sentiments into my cardstock. Now, the great thing about the BetterPress system is you can use many different types of inks and many different types of cardstocks. I didn't know whether I wanted to have gold sentiments on the white cardstock or red sentiments. So the first ones I'm creating are with some gold embossing powder. I pour that powder on top of those pressed sentiments and then use my embossing tool to melt that powder. Once I have all of that melted, I'm going to line up the coordinating die with it and we can die cut them easily. And it's as easy as that to create 10 different sentiments all at once that works for many different holiday cards. The next set of sentiments I'm going to create is going to be with some Lumberjack Plaid Distress glaze. So that way I have a combination of colors, or I can pick and choose which color is going to suit the card that I'm creating. I chose the gold embossing powder because a lot of these pre-cut die cuts as well as printed papers have gold foil embellishments or gold foil accents to them. So that gold is going to coordinate perfectly with that. But sometimes a red sentiment works perfectly with holiday cards as well. You could even use some of the solid cardstock in the kit to put these sentiments on if you wanted to have a colored cardstock piece underneath that. That would work as well. So the process for the second set of sentiments, exactly the same as the first one. I used some embossing powder tool on my cardstock. I used VersaMark ink on that press plate, put the clear plate to the base, ran it through my die cutting machine, poured that Lumberjack Plaid glaze on top of it, tapped off the excess. If there's any crystals of embossing powder where you don't want it to go, a soft brush will help to remove that. You want to do that before you melt that with your embossing tool. Then we can take that coordinating die set, and I do use some Best Ever Craft tape in order to tape that die set in place. I want to make sure that that die is not going to move on me while I'm doing my die cutting. So I tape it in place and then I run it through my die cutting machine, and it die cuts all 10 of those sentiments at once. So it makes it really quick and easy to create a ton of sentiments. And you can easily use this set for any holiday card creation, not just this kit. Now I'm going to have 20 sentiments all together between these two colors. I'm really only going to use a few of them. Any of the extra ones, I'll just take a Ziploc bag, put them in that Ziploc bag and keep it with this press plate and die set, and they'll possibly work for future projects, but this is the easiest way to know exactly where I'm going to find those sentiments. So I have all of these done, ready to go. We're ready to start creating our cards. Now I took my kit and I just stacked up a bunch of different die cuts, bunch of different chipboard die cuts. I combined all of the different elements to create these cards. I wanted to have them all ready to go so they're easy to put together and assemble. So I have a piece of solid cardstock here that is trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I have a printed paper that is trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. For this first layer, I'm going to use that tape that comes in the kit. For the rest of the cards, however, I'm going to be using my liquid glue. I find the liquid glue is so much faster than using the tape. I'd like tape for certain projects, but I don't necessarily love it when I'm creating my cards because I think it takes a while to take the backings off of the tape constantly. So I tend not to prefer that. Those chipboard stickers have adhesive on the back of them already, so it's just a matter of peeling that back, as well as the puffy stickers. They have their stickers, so they have the adhesive on the back, so it makes it really quick to put those pieces together. To add just a touch of sparkles to a lot of my cards, I'm using some Stardust Stickles. This is iridescent. It doesn't have any color to it. It's just going to add some texture and sparkle and just kind of take it to the next level. There is foil accents on a lot of these different pieces, but because they are chipboard stickers or regular paper die cuts, they don't have a lot of texture otherwise. They're fairly flat. So by adding the stickles, it just gives it a little bit of extra texture to it. So I'm going to do this second card again. The layers for my mats are mostly the same. However, there's a couple of printed papers that I realized I cut a little bit too wide. So I end up cutting it down to 3 1/2 inches by 5 inches. So my mats are not exactly even on a couple of the cards because of that error, but you don't really notice it. There's a lot of printed papers here as well as printed die cuts. So that kind of takes the focus. So I'm using the card bases that come in this kit. Like I said, there are 20 different 20 A2 cards and envelopes. If you're going to create more than 20 cards, obviously you'd need more card bases, but this is plenty to start with, and they really come together super easy. A lot of these pre-printed die cuts have duplicates to them. So if you wanted, you could make 2 of exactly the same card using the same die cut. So you could do one design, do 2 cards, unless you did a duplicate of the die cuts on one card, like this house or this card here. I'm using the die cut houses. There's one large house and then there's 2 smaller pink houses. I'm using both of those pink houses on this particular card, mainly because there wasn't a third different style house, and I thought it would look a little odd with just 2 houses. I wanted to have 3 to it. So I decided to use them on the same card, but it would be easy to create duplicate cards regularly throughout this kit. The only thing you might have to change is if you use some of the cardstock stickers or puffy stickers. Those ones don't have duplicates on them, but there's a lot of different variety with the sentiments on them. You could do 2 different pre-printed paper die cuts and then do 2 different chipboard stickers if you wanted. So there's a lot of variety that you can get. But again, I didn't have to spend any time matching my papers, matching my embellishments, because they all come in the same kit. They're all in the same color palette, so they work well perfectly. So this next one here, I'm going to use some of the mirror cardstock for my mat. Typically, I will take that mirror cardstock and die cut something out of the center of it just to make it go a little bit further. At this point, I didn't have anything I wanted to die cut out of it, so I'm just using the full piece here. The one thing with these metallic papers in this kit is it's the gold, the shiny gold or the shiny silver on both sides. It's got a coating on that cardstock, so it's going to take just a little bit longer than regular cardstock to dry, but it does dry with that liquid glue. I love using that liquid glue for many things because it gives you that little wiggle room to move and shimmy things in place. And I really like to have that leeway to be able to do that. There's a ton of different little postage stamp type pre-printed die cuts here that I decided to gather all together and put as a cluster on this particular card. I just thought it'd be fun to have them all displayed together. And then for this one, I'm using one of those press plate and die sentiments. It says delivering warm hugs, and I thought that worked perfectly with a little postage stamp pre-printed pieces. I wanted this to stick out just a little bit, so I'm going to use those foam squares that come in the kit. Now they're kind of cut in the middle of that foam piece, so you can see that there's a lot of different area around it. Those pieces I'll cut into different strips for other sentiments to use those pieces up. So any of the excess from the outside edges, I don't waste it. I use those on die cuts. I just use my scissors to trim those up. Just because the contents paper says there's 40 foam squares doesn't mean you only have 40 foam squares. There's a lot of excess on there that you can easily use. Once again, I'm going to add some stickles here just to give it a little bit of extra texture and sparkle. Typically I'll put stickles on like berries or flower centers. Here I did it on some snow on some of those little postage stamps. So anywhere that you want just to add a little bit of texture and sparkle. And because it is an iridescent clear one, you're still going to see the print underneath there. It's not going to hide anything underneath there. It's just going to add that little bit of extra texture. We have another one here where I use some solid cardstock on the bottom and then a printed paper on the top. Typically for these cards, the way that I picked them is I picked printed papers that I liked. I looked for different pre-printed embellishments that I thought would go on those printed papers. And then I chose a solid cardstock to do as a mat behind it. This one here, I grabbed a scrap of white paper to go in that frame because I wanted these Christmas crackers on there. The printed paper has Christmas crackers all over that background, and I thought it would work well with these die cut pieces, but I didn't want to have those crackers on the print on the back because I thought they would get lost. It would get a little bit busy. So I just grabbed a scrap of white paper to put underneath that chipboard frame there. Here I'm using one of those little strips that I've cut off of my foam tape. That way we get where we extend our foam tape a little bit more, and it works really well for those sentiments to add that foam tape to the back of it. Here I actually did it on the cracker, not the sentiment. And then I'm going to add some glitter to that cracker that I just put on the foam tape just to give it a different texture from the other crackers, make it stand out a little bit. And again, you can see the print right underneath it, so it's not covering up the print, it's just adding that texture and that sparkle. Now I'm not waiting here for these to completely dry. I'll show you them totally dry at the end of the video. I'm just setting them aside to dry. Depending on the amount of stickles you put on your pieces, it'll probably take between 15 minutes to a half an hour to dry, and I didn't want to wait that much between each card before showing it. So again, I'll show that at the end where it will be completely dry. Now, one of the best things about using a kit like this is because everything coordinates. All I have to do is spend time matching the different papers that I want to do with the different embellishments, then cut everything up. I use my large craft stacks in order to stack everything up before assembling, and I do the assembly all at one time. So it really streamlines card making. If you have a ton of cards to make, it kind of changes the way you do things. Typically when I'm creating, I'll work with a die set or a press plate set and kind of create from there. But by doing it from pre-printed papers, it changes it up just a little bit, and it's a great way to just get out of your crafting comfort zone. Also a great way just to create a ton of cards and just kind of free up yourself with it. Because you have all of these pre-printed pieces ready to go, it's fun to mix and match them, seeing which ones you think work best with them, and then adding a sentiment to it. Now, I typically don't pair pinks with reds. There's obviously a lot of pink and red in this kit because of the printed papers. I think they look cute when you've got pre-printed papers, but it's not something that I would do on my own with like solid color papers. So by having the pre-printed papers, it kind of frees you up for pairing those together. I was always raised that we do not put red and pink together. So at times I have a little bit of a hard time with it, but it's definitely a fun way to just add a different spin on holiday cards. Now I'm doing 15 cards total in this video. The first 12 of them, aside from a few sentiments, only use things from the kit. The last 3 use things from the kit, as well as some die cuts from that Festive Floral Mix die and the Merry Greetings die. Now, I did swap a couple sentiments with the holiday banner greetings press plate sentiments that I created at the beginning of the video, just so that we had a little bit of variety between the two, but there's a ton of extra sentiments, so you don't need to use those sentiments from that press plate and die set. You absolutely can swap them out for sentiments that are already in this kit. I wanted to just show this kit with those add-ons together, as well as items from this kit on its own, because different people have different likes, different tastes, and I just wanted to try give a lot of variety of different ways to use them. I love trying to mix and match the different die cuts that are already made to see what works well together and what doesn't. There is one of the die cut pieces that are all basically shapes and images, and then there's one that is mostly sentiment. So it works well to just go through all of those sentiments and see what sentiments there are, as well as work through all of the different image or shape die cuts and see what mixes and matches well. It's kind of like a little bit, I personally kind of use it as a challenge and a little bit of a game just to kind of see what I can put together. I typically, in my regular crafting, don't do a ton of stuff with printed papers. I lean towards solid colored papers or solid cardstocks with a little bit of prints from, say, press plates or from, say, background stamps or that sort of thing. So it's fun to stretch those creative boundaries by using some printed papers as well as printed die cuts and just change it up a little bit. Here's another one where there was only 2 different stocking die cuts, but I didn't want to have just 2 on a card. I kind of run from the rule of odd numbers, and I thought an odd number of stockings would look better than just 2. So I'm putting the 2 matching ones on the outside, and then I'm putting the odd one or the different one on the inside of it, trying to make it look like it is hanging right from that wreath. If you have it a little bit below, you can always use a gel pen to connect it. And I do that in another card where I'd use some ornament die cuts, and I use a gel pen, a gold gel pen, to create strings for those die cuts to hang from. I always do the stickles last because personally, if I have something wet on my card, that's the first place my hand is going to go. And then once I have those stickles on there, I put them around the outside of my desk so that they have some space to dry where I'm not going to touch them. And for some of the cards, I use a lot of die cuts, and for some of the cards, I use very few die cuts just to keep it a little bit simpler. I like kind of playing around with having some cards that are simple, some cards that are a little bit more complicated or have a little bit more to them. Because we have a combination of printed die cuts as well as chipboard pieces and puffy stickers, we can have a little bit of extra texture when we combine those. For the ones that only have the paper die cuts, like this particular one here, adding those stickles at the end just give it a little bit of extra texture, or you can use those foam pop dots. The printed paper die cuts, though, they're not really thick, they're just like printed papers that you get at a scrapbook store. So you want to make sure that you are generous with your foam pop dots if you're going to use them, so that it has enough stability and it holds that paper die cut to there. This one here really only has 3 die cuts to it, but I just love the simplicity of it, and I think that poinsettia is perfect with the poinsettia on that printed sentiment card. This one here is the one where I use a bunch of different ornament printed die cuts. There was a ton of them in that the die cut pack, so I wanted to make sure to use as many as possible. I think in that pile that I use, there's only one that I end up not using, and that's just because it's kind of a red snowflake pattern that matches the printed paper in the background, so I figured you weren't going to see much of it anyways, so I just kind of eliminated it because there's no point in putting it on there if you can't see it. I'm also using my handy tool pack to kind of poke out different pieces of the die cut that didn't actually come out. So for these ones here, for the ornaments, there's that little hole at the top of the ornament that don't get pressed out, so I just use the die pick part of it just to poke that out. It's going to look a lot better on the card if that is poked out rather than left in there, and a die pick really works perfectly for that. So once we have our small ornaments glued on here, I'm taking that large one that I have to the top left of my screen. I'm going to add foam dots to the back of it just so that it raises a little bit and has a bit of dimension. and gives a little bit of dimension to this card. I'm going to glue all of my ornaments on first, and then I'm going to take that gold gel pen and draw a string or a line to them. Otherwise it looks like they're floating in space and it looks a little bit odd, so it definitely looks nicer for them to have that string on them. Another option, if you happen to have some gold cord, that would be really pretty on your card as well. This kit doesn't have any cords or ribbons in it, and I don't have any gold cord on hand, so just using a gold gel pen works perfectly. You get the same idea from it. It doesn't have as much texture to it as, say, an actual cord would, but you can see that those ornaments are not floating in space. They're actually hanging from something. After I put those 5 on there, I decided to use that one last ornament there. This one is pink. It's not the red one that I was talking about, and I glued that a little bit behind the large one and then added that cord. And then again, a little bit of Stickles. I think I did Stickles on, I think it was 12 or 13 of the 15 cards. I didn't put it on all of them, but I put it on a lot of them just because I like that extra little bit of texture that it gives. It doesn't give any color, like I said. It just gives that little bit of sparkle and that little bit of texture and just takes it, in my opinion, to the next level. It's such a simple thing, but I think it really is effective. Now, I use the iridescent one for most of my projects because I just want that sparkle. I don't want to cover up the color that's underneath, but you certainly could use, say, a gold Stickles in place of it if you wanted to add that color. They come in a bunch of different colors, so you can pick and choose what works best for what you're creating. I tend to prefer the iridescent one. It's just, I prefer iridescent things anyways. So, and it works with pretty much anything. This next one here, again, using a few different pre-printed die cuts. You can see how quick and easy these cards are coming together. It probably took longer to just put bundles of different things together to use and to stack together than it does to assemble them. They come together super, super quickly because I have everything together ready to make. And by putting them all together and stacking everything in my large craft stacks and having them ready to go, I can just work on the assembly process at once. I can work on the prep process at once, and it really streamlines everything. If you go to, say, craft retreats or whatever, this is a great thing to bring to them because you can get a ton of cards done just out of that kit. And if you prep everything ahead of time, you don't really need to bring much else other than your adhesive. Just depends on how you like to craft. When I go to retreats or take part in retreats, I typically will prep everything ahead of time so that I have as few supplies to bring and to haul as possible. I like to try to prep that ahead of time so that I can get a lot of stuff done at once because it's all ready to go. Now we have another printed background here with our die cuts here. This is the one where I used the Merry Greetings die set. I used one of the solid cardstocks for the shadow for the die, and I used one of the gold cardstock for the actual words to the die. Now, as I said before, the gold and the silver cardstock has a coating on it, so it did make it a little bit challenging to die cut through it. It did die cut through it, but there's a few places that didn't go all the way through, so you can see a few white spots on the back side of my die cut. Regular like the gold cardstock from the treasured cardstock packs are a little bit easier because that coating is only on the one side, it's not on both sides. For these here, it's a little bit harder with some finer die cuts. They do go through it, but you might rip the backing of it. In my opinion, it doesn't really matter because that backing is glued down to something, so we're not going to see it. But just know that you may have to go through it a little bit or put a shim in your die cut sandwich just to give it a little bit of extra pressure. Last up, I'm going to put some Stickles on the berries on the wreath just to give that a little bit of texture so that it has something, that wreath itself sparkles as well as the shine on the die cuts for the sentiments. This one here, I'm using the Festive Floral Mix die set. I'm pairing it with one of the puffy sticker sentiments as well as one of the die cut printed pieces. I like the combination of the printed papers with the pre-printed die cuts with the actual die cuts. And the cardstock that I die cut for these is from that kit, so I didn't use any extra cardstock for those die cuts. This way it matches perfectly. The top layer for the poinsettia, I did 2 layers for each poinsettia. I used my fingers to curve those petals of the poinsettias just so that they would have a little bit of extra dimension to it, a little bit of extra texture. I'm going to use the gems for the centers of the poinsettias just to give them, again, a little bit of extra texture. And once we have all of our florals together, we can start to assemble our card. So we're going to put the solid piece down first, gluing that down in the center of the card. And then we're going to add our printed paper to the background. I'm going to do the 2 printed die cuts first. They're going to go in the top left corner and the bottom right corner. Then we're going to add that foam sentiment sticker in the center, but I'm not going to press that foam sentiment down too much. I want to be able to tuck in the flowers underneath some of the areas, not the poinsettias. I don't want the poinsettias tucked in, but these cream colored flowers, I like tucking them in behind other die cuts, but I also sometimes like to die cut them or have them tucked in behind my sentiments. Just depends on what the sentiment is and the look that I'm going for. You'll see in just a minute, there I go, I put it underneath that Mary because I don't want to cover those words up, but I do want a flower in that area. So by being able to tuck that in and not pressing that sentiment down all the way, it gives you that little bit of wiggle room. I'm going to add some stickles to the berries on the printed die cut just to give that a little bit of extra sparkle. And here is that finished card there. Super simple and lots of texture because of the combination of die cuts as well as the puffy sticker and the printed papers. This one here, the mailbox, is one of those pre-printed die cuts, and we're pairing that with the printed paper for our background as well as some different die cuts from that Festive Floral mixed die. Here I did a poinsettia with the dark red as well as some cream poinsettias. And then for the small florals, I used one of the pink papers in that pack. So I'm going to use the die cut pieces done with the gold cardstock for the centers of the poinsettias. But the centers of the small flowers on this one, I'm using some of those smaller gemstones gemstones that came in the pack. I just used the cream ones for all of these just because I didn't think red in the center of those pink flowers would look great. And this particular printed paper doesn't have a lot of that minty greeny color, so I didn't want to put those in the centers of the flowers either. With the centers of the flowers done, we're ready to start assembling our card. So I'm going to add our mailbox to the center of the card. I'm going to have the florals and the greenery on the bottom of the card, adding one of our press plate embossed sentiments to the top. And then we can layer up the die cuts. For the die cuts, because I'm using that liquid glue, I'm only putting the glue in the center. I want to be able to tuck in the little holly pieces as well as our pink flowers. The liquid glue gives you the freedom to be able to do that. That's one of the reasons why I tend to like doing it. I like being able to lift things up and tuck things underneath if I didn't know exactly where they were going to be placed ahead of time. By having that liquid glue, it gives you that little bit of slower drying time so you can easily do this. With that double-sided tape, it makes it a lot harder to do this. As well as the fact that when you're putting things behind each other, sometimes you don't know exactly how far they're going behind. So by having that wiggle room from the liquid glue, it gives you that little bit of leeway to be able to do that. Once we have all of these pieces done, we can add just a tiny little bit of stickles on the berries on the mailbox. I didn't really want to add them to our florals, but you certainly could put them in the center of the poinsettia if you wanted to. Then we let everything dry. And this was the 15th card, so all of our cards are done. And like I said, I still have a ton of stuff left in that kit. We can still make a ton of different cards. It would actually be interesting one time to just see how many cards you can make from one kit. You would definitely need more white cardstock for more card bases, but you can get a ton of different cards out of the kit. And because everything is coordinating and works well together, you don't have to worry about stopping to match things, which is always fun. So these cards came together super quickly, and you can tell that the assembly process is really easy. Because I had everything pre-planned, pre-stacked, ready to go, I didn't have to spend a lot of time humming and hawing over where I wanted everything to go. You could easily swap out different printed papers for the backgrounds if you have extras in your stash that you want to use up. You could easily swap out different die cut pieces. There's more than enough left over in this kit to do duplicate cards of many of them. You probably run out of printed papers before you'd run out of some of the printed ephemera. These are just a great way to create a ton of cards, get a little bit out of your comfort zone, because this is not something that I do a ton of with printed papers and printed die cuts. I do it every once in a while, but it's definitely not something that it's not my comfort zone. It's kind of out of the comfort zone. I love it as a creative challenge just to see what I can come up with things that are already there, ready to go, that someone has curated and put together for me. It's just a fun challenge. And all of these cards are completely different. Like I said earlier, I used the add-ons with the Festive Floral Mix die, as well as the Merry Greetings die set and the Holiday Banner Greetings press plate and die set. Those sentiments can easily be swapped with things that are already in the kit, so you don't necessarily need them, but they're definitely fun to add extra texture and to be able to change things up a little bit. The floral dies that I used in here, you could swap out with other floral dies that you have or Christmas florals that you have already, or you could swap it out with other printed pieces in this kit as well. There's so many different things to play with and create a ton of different but unique cards with. You'll find everything that I've used listed and linked down in the description box below. Like I said, I'm using this kit, a couple of the add-ons, and then I use my BetterPress system to create those sentiments. I use some Stickles as well as my handy tool set and my detail scissors, but there's not a lot of other sentiments that there's nothing that I didn't already have in my stash that I used up. So it's a great way to create a ton of things, create a ton of holiday cards all at one time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.